Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. Today, we're going to talk about a big topic. We're going to talk about character. What is it even? And do you just have it naturally, or is it something you have to build? What does it actually mean to infuse our content with character? And why is it the name of this podcast? In the next 2 episodes, I'm going to invite you to take a look at what you're creating in your business, content or otherwise, and ask yourself where character plays a role and how you're showing up in yours. Hi, welcome back to the Content with Character podcast. All right, as I said, this week we're going to talk about character, and next week we're going to talk about making your client or customer the main character, like how to really give them the spotlight, hug them every step of the way by delivering an impeccable, memorable customer or client experience. But before I really get into it all today with the topic of character, I just wanted to take a moment to thank my fellow podcaster friends and give credit to Lisa Zarotny, host of Positively Living, for hashing through my ideas this week, and also to Alicia Galati, host of Listeners to Leads and Successful Podcasting Unlocked. Both of them really helped me to hone in on how to make this 2 separate episodes, all from the topic of character. I had a lot of ideas, I threw them at them, and they helped me to kind of parse them out. That said, if this episode is a total flop, it's not their fault, it's mine. And if it goes really great, it was all their idea. Usually I brainstorm really, really well alone. But sometimes I just really need somebody with like that outside perspective who can help me spin an idea, the thread of an idea, into what I hope is solid gold. And I hope that this week and next week's episode are no exception. Of course, I will include Lisa and Alicia's podcast in the show notes because chances are high that if you like my show, you will greatly enjoy theirs as well. Just a teeny tiny way to pay it forward. Okay, and final bit of housekeeping before we dive in. I always like to introduce myself to anyone new that we have listening because I don't want you to feel unwelcomed. So big hug or high five if that's more comfortable for you, and welcome. I'm Emily Aborn. I'm the host of this podcast as well as the She Built This podcast. I'm a content copywriter, a speaker, and if I do say so myself, I am quite a character most of the time. This month, May 2024, which is when I'm recording this episode, I am currently amidst celebrations of my podcast anniversary and happily here to report that Content with Character turned a year old this month. Hooray, confetti, piñatas, cake, balloons, yada, yada. She Built This, my other podcast, is almost 6. And it's funny how I never, ever, in building that podcast, I never took time to celebrate the milestones along the way. So with this podcast, I'm making sure to cheer myself on consistently every single step of the way. And you are part of that because you show up week after week. So I'm celebrating you also. Fun fact I just learned recently from my friend Alicia Galati, who I mentioned earlier of Galati Media, is that most podcasters don't make it. In fact, 90% of podcasters don't even make it past 3 episodes, and only 90% of those remaining make it past 20 episodes. So you see, the fact that I've been up to this for a year and the other one for 6 years, that is quite some reason to celebrate. I think that the fact that it's been a year, it's been a minute, calls for a quick little word about how and why I came up with the name for the podcast, which is also going to set the scene for today's conversation and launch us into the topic du jour, which is character. So rewind time with me for a moment. Insert sound of ticking clock here. Rewind back to 2023. I had my She Built This podcast happily purring away in the background, and my copywriting business was starting to pick up a whole lot more momentum after 5 years I had been plugging away. I'd always been busy, but I got a lot more busy. And She Built This, in addition to being a podcast, was actually an entirely separate side venture I had going with a group and events and membership and also sorts of other little fun stuff for women entrepreneurs. But I made the decision for a lot of reasons, a lot of personal reasons, reasons to close my group and focus fully on my copywriting. And like I said, I'd been building this business for 5 years, but realistically, I had been putting it on the back burner a lot of time. I often felt torn between the two endeavors. I was trying to give my all to both of them. And in the meantime, it was leaving very little left for much else in my life. So for the first time ever, in the past 10 years, I decided to go all in on myself, take a bet on myself, and give myself that 100%. So it was with that decision and that clarity that I reached out to Alicia Galati of Galati Media, my friend, and I booked a strategy session with her to review the She Built This podcast. So as I was asking her for her advice on how I could make the podcast join me along in my transition, how could I improve it overall? And, I just had like a whole list of questions. I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but I had some questions for Alicia on like the podcast itself. After our session, Alicia, she's a great listener. And after the session, she offered me 2 ideas. One was to pivot the podcast entirely to be focused on content, marketing, and visibility. Essentially, that meant I would be renaming it, rebranding it, like the whole works. The other idea, and she shared the pros and cons with me of doing that. Her other idea was to start a new podcast entirely with content, marketing, and visibility as the focus, which we now have come to know and love as Content with Character. When Alicia first told me idea number 2, I was like, no, that's a little nuts. Like 2 podcasts, I thought, how could I possibly, what would people say if I put myself out there and my own thoughts and ideas out there? And what would they say if I had 2 podcasts? But this was like one of those seeds that once you plant it, you can never stop it from growing. It just grew and grew and grew in my mind. I thought about it constantly. And then I told myself, okay, if I can come up with at least 20 ideas for various Content with Character episodes. Well, I hadn't had a name yet, but I will think about doing this. So I came up with like 50 ideas, and then I just kept coming up with influx of ideas for names. So I started jotting them down and just like letting myself stay excited and dream, and I kept my secret very, very close. In March of 2023, 3 months after Alicia and I had our strategy session, I was home by myself for a week while my husband dog sat for his sister in New Jersey. And while I was home alone, we got a reckoning of a New England snowstorm. Like it was at my house, we had about 40 inches of heavy, wet snow. I woke up one morning to the sound of my alarm going off in the house because we had actually like lost power. So I tromp out there in the dark in my PJs to start up the generator. And like you guys, I was just officially in it. It was 4 days of no power, lots and lots of shoveling, a tree down in my driveway, running half crazed through the woods to get my neighbor to help me refill the generator with gas because the gas cans were too heavy for me, runs to go get more gasoline when the gas cans ran out, a number of other like backwoods New Hampshire tasks. But it was in that experience that the name for this podcast came to me. I was out there that first day. I think it'd been like 4 hours or so that I was shoveling, and it just kept coming down. It was like hopeless. And so I just kept repeating to myself, hard work builds character, Emily. Hard work builds character. And I can remember like the exact shovel load and where I was standing in my driveway when suddenly the name for the podcast popped into my head. And I was like, oh my God, this is the name. Content with Character. Now, for me, the name holds a number of meanings. First off, I've always loved the words authenticity, character, genuine, and like what those words represent and stand for. Also, if you haven't noticed, I am somewhat of a character. In real life, it sometimes feels like somebody is like writing me in. Like, do you remember Amelia Bedelia from those kids' books growing up? Sometimes I feel like somebody is like writing me as Amelia Bedelia. And this character of mine was exacerbated during the snowstorm because like I'm trying to take care of things very practical in the house, like things very outside my wheelhouse. And sometimes I do really funny and dumb stuff. Also, specifically as it relates to like writing and sharing content around social media, I loved the little entendre of a character count, right? Like I use word count and character count often in my life as a writer. So that was like a little extra like, ooh, I like that too. And then I love perhaps more than anything in the world, just the concept, the word character. From a personality standpoint, it's like a, effervescence or uniqueness or flair, like that thing you cannot put your finger on, right? The character of somebody, the je ne sais quoi that a person has. And so was it the most strategic name from a marketing perspective? Probably not. I actually had other name ideas that probably would have performed better from like an SEO standpoint. I had other name ideas that like friends liked better and family liked better and confidants liked better, but I went with this one because I liked it and it really means so much to me. So that brings me to my first question for us today, and that is, what is character? There are a couple definitions, all of which relate to us and what we're creating. So here goes. Definition number 1, character is a person's truth, their essence, the thing underneath it all, their personality, the way they act, what drives them to behave in certain ways, and then how they actually act. Also, these definitions are like from the dictionary, not me, although I am adapting them slightly. Definition number 2, character is that distinctness, that thing that makes you different from somebody else, that uniqueness we all have that sets us apart from the 8 billion other people on the planet. Character is the energy you bring into the room. Now, when somebody refers to somebody else having character, they're usually referring to the good qualities of a person. Maybe it's like their moral or emotional strength, their honesty, fairness, genuineness, following through on their word, trustworthiness, that kind of thing. Think of phrases you may have heard that have to do with the character of a person, like, he's quite a character, or she's quite a character, or that was out of character, or get into character, right? When we're talking about like acting, that person has character. This space has character. The more you say it, by the way, it is a really weird word, but it's a big word. It holds a lot of meaning. It's kind of like the word curiosity has been for me. Like, I feel like it could just be this entire exploration in and of itself. So now my next question for us is, now that we know what character is, how do we build it? Is hard work really the thing that builds character? And I think that the answer there is yes, and it's a matter of perspective. So does hard work build character? I think, first of all, hard work is subjective, right? Like what is hard to one person is not hard to another person. That said, there probably are some objectively hard or easy parts of life. But even somebody who's been through something hard does not always come out with the most radiant of character. In fact, I'm sure you can think of an example in your own life of somebody who had a really tough life, really hard life, and came out with radiant, upstanding character. And then you can probably think of somebody else who had a really easy life and came out that way. And you can probably think of somebody who had a really hard life and is lacking seriously in character, while somebody with an easy life is a jerk to every single person they encounter. So I'm not sure, like, does hard work build character? I don't think that's the only thing, right? I think that a person has to be disciplined, persevering, resilient in some way. And then with those pieces in place, they tend to develop qualities of a person with character, which again, that is a subjective term. But from all of those definitions of character that we talked about before, we see that character is really your essence. It is really who you are. It's shaped by upbringing, experience, values, beliefs, the decisions that you've made along the way, overcoming obstacles, right? The successes, the wins, the lessons learned along the way. So I think that building strong character takes commitment and a level of awareness, both of self and of others. And that commitment and that building awareness, it might feel like hard work sometimes, but in my opinion, it's the best kind of hard work. It is hard work that's rewarding and enjoyable because it's really about making ourselves a better person so that in turn we can make the world a better place. Building character is like the kind of hard work that you can feel good about when you rest your head on the pillow at night. I cannot think of a better way to spend my time than filling my toolbox with ways to be a better character, to have more character, to connect more deeply with others, be more compassionate, more empathetic, and see other people for who they are, and bring to life and highlight their character too. I think an interesting exercise in building character is to choose an area in which you want to build your character and start to be aware and mindful in that area, like I had mentioned with compassion and empathy and better seeing people for who they are. Developing our character is really something that we do through our entire life. It is a lifelong pursuit if we choose it to be. I found some quotes on character and I wanted to share because they sort of highlight that. The first one is by John Wooden. Be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is who you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. Here's another one by Heraclitus. Oh God, poor guy. I can't pronounce that name. Anyway, the quote will be in the show notes so you can see it written out. But he says, good character is not formed in a week or month. It's created little by little, day by day. Protracted and patient effort is needed to develop good character. Les Brown says, our ability to handle life's challenges is a measure of our strength of character. And this one's funny. It's by Ronald Reagan. You can tell a lot about a fellow's character by his way of eating jelly beans. Ronald Reagan, I would say it's Oreos, but that's funny. And then David Brooks, I just read this recently in a book. Character building is not something you can do alone. Morality is a social practice. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Does hard work build character? Is that the only way, do you think, to build character? Do you consider yourself a person of character? And how has that happened for you? You can always email me or send me a message the way that we message, meaning email, text, Instagram. You know how to do it. My next and final question to you is, what kind of character are you? And how can we infuse more of that into your content? So I'm the oldest of 4 kids, 3 boys and me, and we didn't have a ton of money, understatement of the year, growing up. We were also homeschooled, which translated in my case to just staying home and doing school for an hour, and then I would just go outside and play. My parents both worked, and I think that they didn't want us to have all this free space during the summer to get into trouble. So during the summers, my grandparents would take us in for a week and send us off to various camps. The ones I did were computer camp, which was not my favorite, though I will say this. I have zero recollection of what we actually learned, but I do know that we made a website in that class, and mine was all about horses. I think we had to do literally computer coding in order to make a website. My dad's whole side of the family are very tech savvy. They're IBM and Microsoft and Google people. And so I think they were trying to get me to love those things so that I could, actually make a living. But unfortunately, that did not work. But I did enjoy the horse part of the website. So the following years, my grandmother got me into more creative stuff. So she enrolled me in drama camp, which actually was called music camp because we did, you guessed it, musicals. So this is how drama camp worked. Okay. We met in a school auditorium in Burlington, Vermont, and the group was 50, 60 kids who all went to that school and all knew each other. And, lots of them were into drama. This is nothing against drama, people, but there were a lot of cliques. I was really the uncool, non-dramatic outsider from New Hampshire. I didn't know anybody, and I'm pretty shy in that I don't like to start a conversation with somebody if they haven't initiated the conversation with me. I don't usually talk to people that have their own friends and own cliques if they haven't started the conversation with me. And I do know that drama camp is the one place in life, I just did not make friends. I don't know why, but I could not make friends there. So here's how you get cast into a role. Here's how your character gets chosen at drama camp. We would all read the script, do a bunch of warm-up activities like shaking our bodies, what I call shaking out the sillies, open our mouths wide, that kind of stuff. So after that, you get into the audition part. And that's where you read the part that you want out loud with everybody listening. And you're supposed to do it hypothetically in character, meaning you need to add the flair and the personality of the person you're attempting to get cast as while you're reading. Now, I was horrible at auditioning. I mean, horrible. I just was too nervous and shy and couldn't get out of my head enough to pretend to be like somebody else in front of all of these people. In fact, even when I was a kid playing dress up or dolls or whatever with my friends, I just didn't really like acting and playing pretend. So it was hard for me to get into this whole like audition thing, right? So naturally, due to auditioning poorly, I would get cast as these absolutely pointless, doesn't matter if you can't make it the night of the opening kind of characters. I can like remember all of the lines in every play I was ever in until high school because I had like a total of 4 lines. It was stuff like, really? That's it? Like lines like that. No joke. Now, they used to reassure you, of course, like there are no small parts, just small actors. But I think I was a small actor because I really hated being cast into parts that didn't matter whatsoever. Thankfully, I kept doing some of these things. It started to get a little better in high school and college and things like that. But it wasn't until I was an adult and I learned a few improv games from my friend Lindsay Dreyer that I really got it and was like, oh, this is so fun. I understood what it meant to actually become another character and how your character can play a role in the big picture. It takes all types, as they say. So I wanted to share that funny story because as I was prepping for this episode, I actually went down like a little bit of a rabbit hole and I started reading about the different types of characters that make an appearance in books, movies, plays, shows, musicals, and I found that there are actually quite a few types of characters that typically make up a story. So I thought it would be fun to look at those and ask ourselves, like, which character are we playing the role of? Because I don't think it's just about the type of character you are, but I also think it's the people you surround yourself with, right? The other characters and your role within that whole big picture, that whole cast. So here we go. And yes, I'm highly aware that I'm taking you on like a little bit of a wild ride on this episode, but as you consider what type of character you are and how you show up in your business, here are some of the most common character types for you to reflect on. Number 1, main character. On social media, the cool kids are saying nowadays, oh, this is giving me main character energy, right? It's like it's like an encouragement to exude main character energy in our lives. Basically, that's somebody who's confident, self-assured, maybe charismatic. They put themselves first. It's in the story. This is the protagonist. Okay, this is the one we're rooting for. And if you have main character energy, you're also like kind of rooting for yourself. The second type is the supporting characters. These are characters who are not the main focus, but they do play a significant role in advancing the main plot. These are often the people who, in the book series, like they end up getting their own little book, but it's definitely not the first one. They're living their own path. They present themselves in the story as the sidekicks or the mentors or the friends, family members, and allies of the main character. Then we have the antagonists, the obstacle creators, the troublemakers, the opposition to the main character. They add tension and conflict, and sometimes they add conflict to other people besides just the main character. Then we have dynamic characters. This is a fun one. These are characters who go through a major change or development in the story. So they'll start as one type of person or one way, and they end up someplace completely different. I think of the Cowardly Lion or the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. They're dynamic supporting characters alongside Dorothy, the main character. And then we have round or flat. And this has to do with depth and complexity. Here's where that hard work builds these kind of characters come in. Flat characters are one-dimensional, very simple characters. They have one job in the story and one job only. Then we have round characters, which that's a little bit more of where that, as I said before, that je ne sais quoi comes in. They have a backstory, a personality, and motivations, which we actually get to see. We get to see a little bit more roundness to them. I mean, I want to call it vulnerability for lack of a better word. And then lastly, we have the stock characters, or what I like to call archetypal. Archetypical? I don't know. Typical. They're stereotypical characters that are found across different stories and different genres. Thinking like the wise sage, the hero, the evil villain, the damsel in distress, that kind of thing. You can see some of them fit into other boxes, but they're stereotypical characters. So you're like, Emily, what does this have to do at all with me, my business, my content? Well, I started thinking about where in my own story I put myself. What kind of character am I, and what kind of character are you? As I was thinking about it, I was thinking, I don't think I've scooped up that main character role, to be perfectly honest with you. And I'm not actually sure I want to be a main character when I'm interacting with other people. I think I pretty much always enjoy being in that supportive character role. I can play main character when I'm alone, sure. But I'll say this, I think that we all get to be the main character somewhere. And especially when we are talking about our business, I think that we are the in the driver's seat in our business. We get to take up space, show up as ourselves, and be confident as the leaders of our lives. So we are main characters. We also are in supportive roles. If I look back, I can also see places in my life where maybe I have been a flat character or an antagonistic character or a stock character, right? Like kind of stereotypical. And then hopefully if you're aware and if you're, growing, you're always going to kind of be that dynamic character. I think that's a great place to be. But I don't know. I thought it would be fun to talk about these character types and just like do a little reflecting for yourself on where you are right now. Which one are you showing up as in your content and in your business? So I'm going to go through them again, and I'm going to give a little bit of a businessy spin on it. Then I'll just give you two little like questions or activities or whatever to think on, and then we'll wrap up and I'll set you up for next week. All right, so let's start by talking about those. We're going to save the main character for last. We're going to start with the supporting characters. So if you are a service provider, you're probably a supporting character in some capacity to your clients. In groups and collaborations, you may play this role too, right? And with other friendships and relationships in your life, a supporting character is a great role to be in. Then we have the antagonists. These are like I said, the obstacle creators, the troublemakers, the opposition to the main character. Now, sometimes in our life and our business, these show up as clients, right? You know the clients, you know the ones. But I think that we're also this in some other people's lives. And I don't actually even know if it's a bad thing, because I think that every relationship can teach you something. But I would ask you this. Are you adding unnecessary tension or conflict to somebody else's life? And if so, why? Is somebody else doing that in your life? And if so, is it time to let go of them or the situation? The third type of character, the dynamic character, like I said, hopefully will always be changing, evolving, starting somewhere and ending up someplace else. And I think the best way to do that is exactly kind of what you're doing right now. Reading, listening to podcasts, being open-minded, having conversations, being curious. All of those are great starting points to being more dynamic. And I also want to remind us, let's let that dynamicness show in our business. That is what makes us human. Meaning, it's okay to share when you change your mind. It's okay to share when you evolve, when you shift, when you try something new, to try something messy, right? To end up somewhere else completely different than where you thought you were going. So let's be okay with that dynamicness of ourselves and of our lives, and recognize that that's a piece of our business too. That is a piece of our business. Okay, and then round and flat. I don't know. Let's just not be flat. We just don't want to be flat. But if we are flat, let's look at it a little bit more closely. Are we not feeling lit up by what we're doing? Are we not, do we not maybe have the right cast of characters in our lives? Are we not adding that personality into our business and content? Is it kind of flat? Let's remember, we are 3D. We show up as the 3D human beings we are. We are so much. And so showing up as something that is flat, I think it's important to just ask yourself why. And if you're not even sure if you're doing that or not, I would love to chat with you about that. Okay. And then those stock characters, those stereotypical characters, I don't think it's bad. There's a lot of really good archetypes within there. I don't like the idea of us fitting into molds or boxes. And I also don't like the idea of us like trying to be like somebody else or like doing what everybody else is doing. So if that's the way that the stock or the stereotype is showing up for you, I don't know, maybe break a couple molds, get out of the box. Don't try to fit into some sort of stereotype or framework or whatever that you think you need to be. Be yourself. And lastly, let's talk about that main character. Your personality gets to show up in your business. You get to be the main character. You get to be confident, self-assured, charismatic. And also, let's remind you of this, we get to consider our own needs and feelings as a business owner. As far as I am concerned, we are all the protagonists. You are the protagonist. You are the one I'm rooting for. And so I want to ask you, are you the one that you're rooting for? It's really something to sit with. Okay, and then I'm going to leave you with, last but not least, 2 fun little activities. I don't know, maybe you want to like journal on them or something, but just ways to find threads of your character and what makes you you, because what I want to inspire you to do is bring out more of that and have a little bit more fun in your business and your content by bringing out what makes you you. So recently I was at a job interview. It wasn't a job interview, it was like a collaboration interview, but in the experience, I realized that I actually had not like sat down and really thought about everything that I had done in my life. So I listed out all of these jobs that I had had in my life. And it was really, really an eye-opening experience to see some of the ways that my character showed up throughout my life. And then I also love this activity where you can do this with like taking different ages of your life, and you can basically you do it in 5-year increments. So you would take like age 0 to 5 and just like sort of list out experiences that were threads of you, threads of character in those years. And then you go, 0 to 5, 6 to 11, 12 to 15. You get the idea. Now I'm doing that wrong, but you get the idea. You do 5-year increments and you journal on or write out different experiences that kind of like brought you to where you are in those 5-year increments. And then lastly on this, just like I'm talking about like just listing out for yourself what makes you you. What got me here, right? Who am I? The last one is, this is not my unique idea. This is an idea from Julie Eason. She's an author and publisher, and I believe this was in her book, The 5 Author Freakouts. She calls this the magic list activity, where you sit down and you write 60 can't stop at 30, can't stop at 40, 60 positive adjectives about yourself. And what you will have when you are done with that activity in that list is all of these positive pieces of your character. And that list all together, that is like what makes you you. That is a list that I do not think anybody else on this planet will have the exact same list in the exact same order that you do. So you put that together with your personal experiences, your professional experiences, and like, boom, that will just show you so much of what makes you you and some other really interesting things that you can bring out in your business and in your content. And then my other idea for you is to ask other people what they see in you. Ask other people about your character. Pick maybe 5 trusted and loyal friends or 3 friends if you can only harness 3, and ask them for 3 to 5 adjectives or 3 to 5 statements that they think makes you you. Ask them if you feel comfortable with it, to go into detail about what they see in you and what they love about you. And then also give that back to them, right? So do that for them as well. But I think that's a really good way to really see not just how you see you, but also how others see you. Like, what is that character? What is the energy that you bring to the room? It's such a great activity for that. Okay, that's it for today. I hope this episode was somewhat enjoyable. If you do want to take a more like if you do want to get a look at really what makes you you and what sets you apart as a business owner and in your brand, I do offer a brand messaging guide, which is where we like really deep dive into not who you are, yes, but also some of those other people in your life, like your ideal clients and the people that you work with and things like that. And I get really to the heart of what you do and help it come through in a clear, concise way. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to the brand messaging guide in the show notes. And next week, we're going to talk about another main character, and that is our client and customer. How do we make the client and customer the main character in our content, in our customer service, and also just like throughout our businesses? I can't wait to chat with you then. I think we're going to have a really great time talking, and I have a bunch of ideas to share with you. So I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will chat with you then. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com, and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.